Welcome back, pro wrestling fans. Welcome back, IWC. It's me. It's me. It's the GOC. I'll say that to say this because I tell it like it is. One man, unique, unedited, unscripted, raw dog for you, the fans. Here on Guardian of Chaos, the YouTube channel for Chaos Corner. Another episodic YouTube adventure and story time. Sit back and relax. Drop an elbow on that like button. Shout out to my mods, the OTS Tribal Queen, and my brother from another mother, Austin Nance. I'd also like to give big props to my brothers in the IWC, Hula Grim, Big O, Otis Gaming, Funny Rob Bebe, Midmo Smark, Scripps, Future, Kratos, and all the boys out there in this space. Let's jump right into it. In pro wrestling, true visionaries have always been a rare breed. Throughout history, they were the innovators, the inspired geniuses who changed the landscape of the business and left an indelible mark that continued to reverberate well after they were gone. Vince McMahon's entire national campaign was the product of a far-sighted and bold personality, and such a move required tremendous imagination. Along with his trusted associates, he fostered idea after idea, pushing past bumps in the road with unparalleled ambition. Jim Crockett and Dusty Rhodes were driven as well, and each had a hand in the skyrocketing growth of Jim Crockett Promotions. They were both visionaries, but Rhodes was the creative mastermind behind the company's success. Starrcade, the Great American Bash, and countless other ideas were the product of his inventive mind. Through it, though it was true, as you can see, I got heat with that mechanical bitch, but at least she's letting me know that somebody's at the front door of the Ponderosa. And you know that I know that you're watching. Though it was true he took heat from the fans who felt he needed to step aside a bit from his top babyface role, Rhodes was still hugely valuable as JCP expanded nationwide. Dusty was a superstar, and while people in many of Crockett's regular towns had seen him battle Tully Blanchard and Ric Flair countless times, enthusiasts elsewhere were taking in these bouts for the first time live. As a booker, he was also criticized. Feuds were overly protracted, talent was stale, and there was gross overuse of the Dusty finish, with one wrestler apparently winning only for the decision to be reversed later. The Dusty finish. But the truth be known, Rhodes' talent as a booker had taken JCP out of its safe mid-Atlantic locale and given the company placement on the national stage. By 1987, Crockett had invested a large sum of money to purchase the UWF. He'd worked a deal with the Florida office and bought a plane so to cut down on escalating transportation costs. With the new acquisition and responsibilities came the need for better organization and, more specifically, a solid plan to manage the company's cash and assets. Enormous sums were already being spent to pay stations to air original JCP TV and its content, which was magnified by the addition of the UWF syndication network. It is conceivable that if Bill Watts owed $50,000 a week because of his TV deals, Crockett was on the hook for double that. And for such a massive syndication venture to make sense, JCP needed to be using those stations to generate income, either through advertising or by promoting live shows. Since they weren't running events in 175 plus markets, advertising deals had to make up for their TV expenditures. Despite its success, Jim Crockett Promotions was still a rather humble organization. Whereas the WWF had a staff of over 70, JCP had 14, most of whom were the original office personnel from the heyday of Crockett's regional operation. JCP's Charlotte office organized live shows across the country, coordinated talent for both JCP and the UWF, and handled extensive publicity. Then came the responsibilities tied to television syndication and advertising and keeping up the company's books. The latter necessitated a team of experienced employees by itself, and without additional hires, the regular staff was overwhelmed, to put it mildly. Crockett improved his TV arrangement, devising a specialized syndication package called the Wrestling Network, made up of all four of his programs: NWA Pro, Worldwide Wrestling, UWF Wrestling, and Power Pro Wrestling. The network operated out of the new Dallas office and created an umbrella over the telecasts with the goal of streamlining production and promoting the NWA and UWF together. Because Jim Crockett and the UWF had targeted the same cities prior to the buyout, some markets were receiving programming from both JCP and the JCP-produced UWF. Now viewers would get a mix of content under the Wrestling Network banner. Taking a big load off his Charlotte staff, Crockett hired Time Sales International Ltd. Wow, a company based in Connecticut in the shadows of Titan Towers in the greater New England tri-state Northeast area, to sell advertising. By June 1987, Crockett had lined up stations in 37 of the top 40 markets, and his syndication network blanketed 77% of the country. The WWF, in contrast, had more than 90% coverage. In an interview with the television radio Age, David Crockett, the JCP vice president and TV commentator for its weekend broadcast on WTBS, affirmed that their promotion was going to retain a legitimate approach to wrestling. We're not going to have any snakes, alligators, or chainsaws. But as some TV station honchos knew, viewers wanted the shenanigans of Hulk Hogan, the colorful gimmicks, the animals, the over-the-top characters, which always did good business for the WWF. In spite of the trends in wrestling, Jim Crockett refused to stray too far into the realm of Vince McMahon when it came to in-ring characters and personalities. It didn't take long for the influence of Dusty Rhodes to alter UWF programming. His pal, Magnum TA, was installed as commentator alongside Jim Ross, and slowly the focus shifted off actual UWF performers to Crockett mainstays. As a result, the UWF was treated as a secondary outfit, diminishing the importance of its wrestlers, titles, and live events. In Florida, Rhodes tried to maintain a group of wrestlers for local shows in Tampa, Orlando, and Miami, but fans weren't interested. They wanted to see the big guns of Jim Crockett Promotions, including Dusty himself, and not second stringers. It was the same reason the Central States experiment failed. With house show numbers falling, Rhodes initiated a series of cutbacks, limiting the number of monthly events. Instead of TV tapings every week, they scheduled 2 tapings per week for 26 weeks and cut legendary commentator Gordon Soley's salary in half. Soley had no choice but to quit. Obviously, Championship Wrestling from Florida no longer exists. He told a reporter that quote in the Orlando Sentinel. The anticipated Great American Bash Series kicked off in Lakeland, Florida on July 1st, 1987. I hope your notebooks are out, so you're better off when you walk out of here than when you fucking walked in. Ticket prices were lower than the year before, and Crockett played it much safer when it came to renting large venues, essentially avoiding them with the exception of the Memorial Stadium in Charlotte and the Orange Bowl in Miami. Atlanta's Omni Coliseum was the site of the inaugural War Games, July 4th. A brutal 5-on-5 battle inside a 2-ring cage. The Four Horsemen, Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Lex Luger, and J.J. Dillon, were defeated by fan favorites Dusty Rhodes, Nikita Koloff, the Road Warriors, and Paul Ellering. Oh, what a rush that was. I remember it like yesterday. Tour attendance was impressive. In Landover, Maryland, 15,000 fans. In Chicago, over 10,000. In Charlotte, 25,000 fans. And in Miami, 16,000 fans. And Crockett ran the second War Games at the Orange Bowl in the Bash finale on July 31st. The Horsemen were again toppled when the War Machine, a.k.a. Ray Traylor, the Big Boss Man, Big Bubba Rogers, a masked substitute for Dillon, gave up in that match. On July 11th, 2 major championships changed hands in 2 different cities. Lex Luger, using a chair tossed to him by J.J. Dillon, beat Nikita Koloff inside a cage for the United States belt in Greensboro. Out in Oklahoma City, Steve Dr. Death Williams went over Big Bubba for the UWF heavyweight strap. It was notable that UWF grapplers appeared alongside Jim Crockett. Their talent in cities throughout the tour: Terry Gordy, Eddie Gilbert, Chris Adams, Rick Steiner, and Sting were prominently featured in early to mid-card roles, and they were reliably good. Only a few weeks before, Sting had turned fan favorite and was feuding with Steiner, his ex-tag team partner. Williams, another babyface, was at war with Dick Murdoch and formed a tag team with Terry Bam Bam Gordy of the Fabulous Freebirds to lock horns with Murdoch and Gilbert. The Williams-Gordy tandem gained international fame in the early 1990s. As for Ric Flair, the NWA World Champion, he was inching into a rivalry with Hands of Stone, Ronnie Garvin. Crockett was juggling a lot of different issues, but one of his principal responsibilities was signing and protecting his talent. The Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal, were 2 of his most popular attractions and had been approached by both the WWF and the AWA. Retaining their services was a priority, and Crockett locked the wrestlers down with a big money guaranteed contract that would keep them in the company through 1990. Following his purchase of the UWF, he missed the opportunity to land Ted DiBiase, who promptly joined the WWF and made his debut as the $1 Million Man, because let's face it, everybody has their price, in early June 1987. Between June and September, Jim Crockett also saw 5 grapplers depart for other organizations: Rick Rude, Terry Gordy, Buddy Roberts, Chris Adams, and Manny Fernandez, along with Michael P.S. Hayes, obviously the Fabulous Freebirds. The remaining Freebird inked the contract and later fashioned a new team with Jimmy Jam Garvin. Say what you want, Garvin and Hayes, the new Freebirds, it was nothing like Gordy, Buddy Jack, and Michael Hayes. Those are the fucking Freebirds. Bad Street, Atlanta, GA. Bad Street in the whole USA. Bad Street, nasty and hot. The further down the street, the worse it got. Bad Street. No? Too much? Too soon? Too early? Crockett and Rhodes returned to the NWA brand to Detroit, an unambiguously pro-WWF city. Say that 3 times fast. On September 25th, 1987. They rented the Joe Louis Arena, a venue McMahon had occupied from 1984 until recently when he'd moved to the Silverdome. In a promo piece in the Detroit Free Press, the differences between Jim Crockett and the WWF were once again front and center, and writer Joe Barrett explained that the NWA UWF combination was less glitzy and show business oriented than the other guys. Promoter Gary Juster was optimistic about the event. He told the newspaper that Detroit fans have been waiting a long time for NWA wrestling, and the night of the program, 8,000 frenzied spectators were present at the arena to see Crockett's best and brightest. And those in attendance were in for a treat. Rhodes booked Flair to lose the NWA World title, but the new champion wasn't Steve Williams in a unification match, nor was it heir apparent Barry Windham. The new title holder was Ronnie Garvin. The result was a major surprise and a strategically important one. Without question, Garvin was inherently tough and carried good fan support. At 42 years of age, he was a battle-tested veteran and been embroiled in a feud with Flair since July of that year. Their chemistry worked when it came to street fighting and seismic chest chopping, and their battles garnered a lot of attention. But of all Flair's challengers, including Windham and Nikita Koloff, Garvin was not expected to win the belt. The shock of the moment, plus the fact that Flair was finally beaten, carried a lot of excitement. The booking philosophy behind the switch related to the promotion's upcoming Starrcade event, which was historically the biggest night of the year for Jim Crockett. Crockett and Rhodes wanted Flair to win a return match and regain a championship at the show, meaning Garvin's reign was destined to last 62 days. The idea, credited by some to Flair himself, was agreed upon by all parties, and the Detroit Switch kicked the plan into motion. Starrcade was a Thanksgiving tradition for Jim Crockett, and the 1987 Spectacular marked the company's first foray into the world of pay-per-view, adding to the magnitude of the event. To that juncture, pay-per-view had been dominated by the WWF, and for Crockett to be competitive, he had to cross that bridge. Vince McMahon didn't want to concede anything to his rival and went on the offensive to narrow JCP's chances for success. First, he scheduled a competing pay-per-view for Thanksgiving, naming it the Survivor Series. Then he used his leverage as a leader in pro wrestling's pay-per-view field to get cable systems to reject Starrcade entirely, telling executives that if he went ahead and presented the Jim Crockett program, they wouldn't get the next WrestleMania. That's good shit, pal. It was a harsh move and severely damaged Crockett's ability to land outlets. In fact, Starrcade was only available for pay-per-view in 300,000 households, while McMahon offered the Survivor Series to 7 million homes. In the lead up to Starrcade, JCP TV ratings fell dramatically, and house shows in Los Angeles, Atlanta, and Charlotte drew less than 2,000 fans. Greensboro on October 25th, 1987, drew a trifle better with 3,500. In Dallas, poor advance ticket sales caused Crockett to cancel a program outright on October 15th. Despite a quality roster of athletes, the current matchups were sour, and marketing Ronnie Garvin as the lead babyface and defending champion had its disadvantages, especially when compared with the WWF title holder, Hulk Hogan. Altogether, it was a bad time to lose momentum, and the leaders of JCP crossed their fingers in hopes of a triumph on Thanksgiving night. Let that sink in. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. The WWF was just too strong. Built on the premise of teams vying in elimination matches, their Survivor Series was a loaded bill with 50 competitors in 4 bouts. In one of the contests, Randy Savage teamed with Jake Roberts and Jim Duggan, who returned to the promotion in September, Brutus Beefcake, and Ricky Steamboat to beat the Honky Tonk Man, Harley Race, Hercules, Ron Bass, and Danny Davis. Savage, Roberts, and Steamboat were the survivors. Hulk Hogan partnered with Paul Orndorff, Don Morocco, and Ken Patera and Bam Bam Bigelow in the main event, but took the loss against Andre the Giant, the one-man gang, King Kong Bundy, Butch Reed, and Rick Rude. Andre pinned Bigelow to become the sole survivor. Hogan startlingly was counted out 3/4 into the battle and eliminated. The WWF racked up more than 400,000 in pay-per-view sales and sold out the 20,000 plus seat Richfield Coliseum in Richfield, Ohio, turning the Survivor Series into an undeniable success. In Chicago, Starrcade was underwhelming. Ric Flair recaptured the NWA World Heavyweight Championship from Garvin, but the hometown favorites, the Road Warriors, were subjected to the infamous Dusty finish in their bout with Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, disappointing viewers. Dusty Rhodes was victorious in his contest with Lex Luger and won the United States title. The show was balanced to a certain degree and drew 8,000 fans to the UIC Pavilion, but it was far from the financial bonanza Crockett needed. He offered the program to over 40 closed-circuit TV locations and reached in the neighborhood of 20,000 homes via pay-per-view. Neither the fans nor the powers that be were happy with the results, and loyalists back in Greensboro were exceedingly displeased. Starrcade was their event, and had been so since 1983. Moving the show to Chicago was an effort to play ball with the WWF nationally. But Crockett estranged his most faithful fans in the process, and it was a slight that was soon not be forgotten. The economic reality of Starrcade, high-priced contracts with balloon payments at the end of each fiscal year, and expensive television deals was created an untenable environment, if I said that correctly. And the future of Jim Crockett Promotions was in doubt. Company finances were strained further by exorbitant spending on transportation, jets, and limousines, and the cost of maintaining 2 offices in Charlotte and in Dallas. With regard to the Universal Wrestling Federation, Crockett had committed millions of dollars to purchase the organization, but over the last 4 months of 1987, he ceased running exclusive house shows and TV tapings under that banner. At Starrcade, Nikita Koloff beat Terry Taylor to unify his World TV title with the latter's UWF television crown. But the World Championship of Steve Williams and the tag team belts held by the Sheepherders were effectively retired in December of 1987, when JCP completed a full-fledged merger of the 2 groups. The UWF was no more persona non grata. As the year came to close, Jim Crockett was treading water, and Rhodes was creating new angles in an attempt to spark attendance. Lex Luger turned babyface and went to war with his 4 horsemen mates. And up-and-comer Sting received a push to match his growing popularity. Over in the WWF, Sting's former partner in the Blade Runners, James Hellwig, was off and running as the Ultimate Warrior and displaying a fierce enthusiasm that struck a chord with fans. His impressive power was exhibited each time he stepped through the ropes, especially as he put away foes with his gorilla press slam. Talent on the whole was never a problem for Vince McMahon. Newcomers Ted DiBiase, Rick Rude, Bam Bam Bigelow, and One Man Gang were impact players, and before the end of the year, both Gang and DiBiase were facing off with Hulk Hogan for the WWF Championship. Many old faces were on the circuit, including superstar Billy Graham, Don Morocco, George Steele, in Hillbilly Jim, and the tag team division was robust, led by the Hart Foundation and Demolition. In the months prior to the Survivor Series, Paul Orndorff became a fan favorite, as did Randy Savage, who entered into a lengthy feud with the Honky Tonk Man over the Intercontinental Belt. Heels were aplenty, and Bobby Heenan created an imposing family comprised of Andre the Giant, King Kong Bundy, Harley Race, Rick Rude, and the Islanders. The perfect foils for WWF heroes. Hulk Hogan remained the top banana, and although his rock and wrestling cartoon was canceled in June of 1987, it wasn't because his standing as the WWF's central protagonist had diminished. Kids were growing up with Hogan, and the aura of the Hulkster still cast its glow across North America. On August 28, 1987, he was a headline attraction in Houston during promoter Paul Bosch's retirement show at the Sam Houston Coliseum, and he defeated the one-man gang. Bosch aligned with the WWF after the sale of the UWF, and his retirement event was attended by luminaries from throughout the grappling world. Vince McMahon was joined by Lou Thesz, Gene Kiniski, rival Verne Gagne, and 12,000 spectators, and paying their respects to Bosch for his exceptional contributions to the sport. The living legend Bruno Sammartino appeared on the undercard and beat Hercules by countout in his second-to-last pro match. The next night at the Baltimore Arena, he teamed with Hogan to conquer the one-man gang and King Kong Bundy. Bruno then retired from active wrestling, capping a career that began in 1959 and saw him reign as the Worldwide Wrestling Federation champion twice for a combined 11 years. Let that fucking marinate and sink in your mind. 11 years! After giving up his job as a commentator in March of 1988, Sammartino became a vocal detractor of modern wrestling and condemned the gimmickry antics of McMahon and the WWF. He wasn't alone. His Pittsburgh neighbor, luscious Johnny Valiant, a former Worldwide Wrestling Federation tag team champion in the 1970s, told a journalist this: "I think Vince McMahon must be inspired by Walt Disney these days. Wrestling was on top of the world for WrestleMania 1. Then they started getting in guys who were half-baked entertainers instead of wrestlers." Verne Gagne wholeheartedly agreed. "It makes me sick," Gagne said. "It makes me want to vomit." "It's too far out," Gagne said, tongue-in-cheek. "They look down on the sport. They make a mockery of the whole goddamn thing." And that's true. Kayfabe was gone. The AWA continued to be raked over the coals by the WWF. Co-holder of the AWA World Tag Team Championship, Boris Zukov, left the promotion for McMahon's group mid-reign in late September 1987, and Gagne was forced to re-team Zukov's partner, Soldat Ustinov, with Doug Summers. A short time later, one of Gagne's most valuable long-term commodities, Nick Bockwinkel, took a position in the WWF as a part-time TV commentator and occasional referee. On November 16, 1987, at the Meadowlands in East Rutherford, New Jersey, Bockwinkel participated in an old-timers battle royal with a handful of former AWA stars. Alexa, play tropical thunderstorm sounds. You knew she was coming back, right? You knew this was going to happen, right, Austin? I got heat with this bitch. Unbelievable. This is what happens. It's a slippery slope, all this technology. Back to the story at hand. Don't go anywhere. New Jersey, Bockwinkel, jumping from the AWA to the WWF, along with a handful of former AWA stars. Edouard Carpentier, Gene Kiniski, Ray Stevens, and the Crusher were also involved and in the finals. Lou Thez tossed Pat O'Connor over the top rope to score a win. Gagne saw another champion defect to the WWF in 1987. A few months before Zukov, Sherry Martel, a talented grappler from Alabama, was the current AWA Women's Champion when she walked out, leaving Gagne high and dry. On December 27, 1987, a Minneapolis-trained Medusa Michelli beat Candy Devine to capture the vacant AWA Women's belt in Las Vegas. That same night, Greg Gagne beat Adrian Adonis by disqualification in the finals of a tournament to win the initial AWA International TV title. And the returning Midnight Rockers defeated the original Midnight Express for the AWA World Tag Crowns. On February 4th, 1988, Gagne presented his final offering at the Minneapolis Auditorium, which was scheduled to be demolished, and invited fans to celebrate 55 years of wrestling at the venue. Only 1,700 people were in attendance for the special event, but they warmly received Dick the Bruiser, not Dick the Boozer, Leo Nomalini, Hard-Boiled Haggerty, and the other AWA legends on hand. The real story of the night wasn't the small crowd, but the fact that Gagne was being stripped of his prime facility in the Twin Cities. He couldn't afford the Met Center in Bloomington and was aced out of the St. Paul Civic Center. So in addition to stopping his shows in San Francisco, Salt Lake City, Denver, Milwaukee, Green Bay, and Chicago, Gagne called a halt to regular action in his primary cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul. Historically, a promoter losing the nucleus of his operation was doomsday, but Gagne was a resourceful man who just signed a new contract with ESPN. But essentially, he was a promoter without a territory, and the AWA was confined to TV tapings in Las Vegas and live shows in small cities in Wisconsin and Minnesota. He still carried the important lineage of a Big Three promotion. But in terms of live events and territorial control, the AWA had become a glorified independent. The ESPN coverage kept him in the ballgame. As far as his TV situation went, Gagne was doing pretty well, all things considered. His original syndicator, the New York-based Syndicast Services, severed ties in early 1987, and Gagne hired a veteran radio guy from Minneapolis, Gary Rowan, to help run his television setup. But ultimately, he landed with RJS Marketing Worldwide, which also oversaw the syndication of Pro Wrestling This Week by Joe Pedicino. The All-Star Wrestling Network was commonly in the top 15 in national syndication ratings, lagging behind the WWF and Jim Crockett promotions. With his circuit practically devoid of major markets, Gagne placed an even greater emphasis on booking his heavyweight and tag team champions in friendly territories. Over the first 6 months of 1988, his grapplers appeared in Memphis 18 times, with additional showings in Louisville, Nashville, and Evansville. And to mark Gagne's alliance with Jerry Jarrett, Jerry Lawler beat Curt Hennig on May 9th to capture the AWA World Heavyweight title. The Memphis region was fueled by the influx of AWA workers, and a reliable world champion in the area was a boon to ticket sales. Jarrett received a few JCP cast-offs as well, Terry Taylor and the Rock and Roll Express among them. But Eddie Gilbert's return was the big news. He attacked Lawler with a fireball on February 22nd, and their subsequent matches drew intense heat. A week before Lawler won the AWA belt, Memphis was besieged by wrestlers from Dallas as a part of another talent-sharing deal struck by Jarrett. Michael Hayes, Chris Adams, and Buddy Roberts were on the bill with world-class championship wrestling champion Iceman King Parsons battling Kerry Von Erich in the main event. Now, Parsons won by disqualification. Linking the CWA and AWA with World Class was a tactical move, and all three promotions had something to gain. Notably, though, because of the weakened state of Gagne's company, he was a lot more willing to share power in 1988 than he had been in 1985 or 86 for that matter, as demonstrated by putting the AWA belt on Lawler. Don't go anywhere. Jarrett's CWA might have been in the best position of the three organizations. Alexa, play Tropical Beach Sounds. You can't make this garbage up. You see what's going on here? This is what happens when you're live to tape. I'm live, but I'm taping at the same time. Fuck it, you guys get the idea, right? You understand? As she keeps stepping on me here.
Should I start your free trial and play Tropical Beach Sounds?
No.
Okay. I can play.
I apologize for the cantankerous and vociferousness from the GOC. Oh, that's me. Back to the program at hand. To the show, if you will, because this isn't a fucking podcast. This is a show. Game on. You read it, right? Focus, chaos. Focus. We're on a roll here. Where were we? Linking the CWA, AWA with World Class. Notably, though, because of the weakened state of Gagne's company. And again, the AWA belt was on Lawler. Jarrett's CWA might have been in the best position of the three organizations. His main city, Memphis, was drawing houses 2 to 5 times larger than Dallas. And unlike World Class in the AWA, Jarrett had retained some semblance of a legitimate territory, including several population centers of over 50,000. His top wrestler was the AWA World Champion, and in March of 1988, he gained a national cable outlet on the Financial News Network. Young talent was in abundance in Memphis, as at various times, Shawn Michaels, Scott Steiner, Cactus Jack were in the region. Steiner and younger brother of JCP upstart Rick Steiner won the Renegade Rampage tournament in Memphis in June and teamed with Billy Joe Travis to capture the CWA tag team titles. Wow. Cactus Jack, a protege of Dominic DeNucci in Pennsylvania, held the CWA Tag Team Championship with partner Gary Young before dropping a loser leaves town bout in November. I feel like it's raining outside. Alexa, lower the volume. Alexa, lower the volume. I apologize, fans. But not really. Jeff Jarrett was also making headway as a professional and was exceedingly popular. From a Dallas perspective, the working agreement with the CWA and the AWA was a home run made simpler by Ken Mantell's positioning as co-owner. The problems between Gagne and Jack Adkisson, aka Fritz Von Erich, were well recorded, and the two had nearly run opposition against each other a few years earlier. But Mantell was mending fences and strengthening bonds with associates across the country. He sent out missives to groups of all shapes and sizes and extended his willingness to book world-class wrestlers on independent shows. Independent pro wrestling, the backbone of this fucking industry, the backbone of this business, and that's a fact. Regardless of their location, in the ring, Mantell was also trying to turn things around. He reinitiated the old Freebirds Von Erich feud on December 25th, 1987, and did an injury angle with Fritz Von Erich, which meant Kerry and Kevin wanted revenge on Terry Gordy, Buddy Roberts, and their new partner, Blackbird King Parsons. Michael Hayes joined the Von Erichs in their quest, and matches were set up for months. That's right, the Freebirds against each other. Hayes and Gordy. On May 8th, 1988 at Texas Stadium, Kerry beat Parsons to capture the world-class world championship, and Kevin teamed with Bruiser Brody to beat Buddy Roberts and Solomon Grundy. Attendance was upwards of 7,000 fans, the largest Parade of Champions crowd in 2 years. And regular crowds at the Sportatorium were way up from the terrific lows in 1987. Mantell's gains were noteworthy, but the Dallas office had limited financial resources and could only do so much. Additionally, the arrangement Atkinson made with Bum Bright ended without the promised success. The October 1988 edition of Penthouse described the hypocrisies, tragedies, and the overall downfall of the Von Erich family. It was a revealing portrait of pro wrestling's first family that traced the timeline of events between David's death in 1984 and Michael's suicide 3 years later. Included were all the dark details about the various arrests, the drug abuse, and the injuries suffered by the brothers. And it was an article the senior Atkinson hoped would never see the light of day. "We're better known now because we die," Fritz told D Magazine. Unfortunately, there was much sadness yet to come. Tragedy was being felt throughout the wrestling world in 1988. I hope you're still here and your notebooks are out. On July 4th, 33-year-old Adrian Adonis was killed in a car accident in eastern Canada. A former AWA and WWF Tag Team Champion, Adonis was generally underappreciated as a wrestler. And although his weight held him back at times, he was a solid performer on the mat. Pat Kelly and Wild Man Dave McKigney also lost their lives in the wreck, and Pat Kelly's twin brother Mike was the sole survivor. 12 days later in Puerto Rico, no me jodas, maricón, muévete, culo, pendejo. No offense, de nada, man. Lighten up, kayfabe. And before I get on to this seriousness of this legend, Alexa, play Tropical Thunderstorm sounds. Bear with me, fans. We're almost done. We're less than an hour, so stay here. I greatly appreciate each and every one of you.
Here's a mix based on that song on Amazon.
You can't make it up. 12 days later in Puerto Rico, 42-year-old future Hall of Famer Bruiser Brody was stabbed in the locker room of Juan Ramon Lubrial Stadium in Bayamon, Puerto Rico by Jose Gonzalez, that fucking scumbag. A wrestler known as Invader One, and died the next morning, leaving his wife and young son behind. An international superstar, Brody was pro wrestling's #1 nonconformist, and after 15 years in the industry, he'd pretty much seen it all. He had brawled with the biggest names in the business, exchanged fisticuffs with fellow wrestlers behind the scenes, and walked away from promotions at the drop of a hat when he felt slighted by promoters. Insiders knew his stormy disposition all too well, just as friends knew the depths of his heart and loyalty. Brody was a force of nature, and a man some people figured was immortal. Without a doubt, he was one of the most important performers of wrestling's territorial era. Rest in peace, Bruiser Brody. Fans, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Story Time. Death of the Territories, here on Guardian of Chaos, the YouTube channel. I can't thank you guys enough. I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. Stay mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually fit. Surround yourself with like-minded people, because if he's for us, no one could be against us. And without my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, none of this would be possible. I'm here for a mere temporary distraction, a stress reliever, for the business and industry that I love, that gives me this motivation and passion at 61 years old. My over 50 years as a researcher, a historian, a scout, agent, a producer, a sweeper of floors, setter up of rings, flyer hanger, ticket seller, fan, smark, mark. That's right, I said it, mark, because we're all marks and I'm proud of it. And my over 3 decades as a pro wrestling manager who took the fucking bumps, came out 2 and 3 times a night and traveled this country. I consider myself fortunate, blessed, and humbled to be a part of this industry after all these years. Still currently active in 2025, doing the color commentary and play-by-play for Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling and the Paradise 4, and you know who they are. Pretty Paul Roma, Mario Mancini, Paul Perez, and Big Steve Tracy. So thank you for being here. Come on back to the channel. Well over 1 million total views. Well over 5,000 videos. Nobody works harder for you than I do. I'm no better, no different, just a niche channel. And I'll continue to do this until my last breath. In order to get respect, you have to start with respecting yourself. Once you do that, you open other people's minds to respecting you. Because there's 3 types of people in this world. Those who don't know what happened, those who wonder what happened, and people like the GOC Big Daddy that make things happen. I'll say that to say this, because I tell it like it is. Don't you dare miss it.